Hey there folks, this is GreenyXI welcoming you right back to Let's Play Umineko. We have made it to the 50 episode landmark. So, in the last episode, we saw Twilight's 4 through 6 get taken care of, with 3 more deaths as they went to get food from the main mansion from the guest house, away from the guest house. So, it looks like from that first line, we're going to be back in the guest house and seeing how our remaining survivors are doing. Let's go. 30 minutes had already passed since Rudolph's group had left the guest house. By any measure, their return was too late, and Kraus and Natsui, who waited by the entrance, were reaching the limits of their patience. The chain was set on the door. That was a precaution in the event that Rudolph's group was attacked and the master key stolen from them. For that reason, they needed to wait by the entrance like this for the others to return. They really are too late. Don't you think something might have happened to them? Indeed. Kraus glanced between his watch and the door, struggling to keep his composure. If something happened to prevent them from returning. A terrible thought, but it seems we should ready ourselves for that possibility. So it really was too reckless after all. That's what I said. Why did they go outside when they knew it was this dangerous? How foolish. Why go outside even though Rosa-san had just been attacked? Nothing will come of saying that now. At any rate, there are now 3 adults in the guest house. Me, you, and Eva, who's asleep with a high fever, and, obviously, Nanjo. At that time, the forceful sound of a door being opened came from the hallway, and they heard Eva's panicked voice. That voice kept calling out to Hideyoshi's name. It seemed as though she'd had a bad dream or something due to her fever, and was calling for her husband. Eva-san, what is it? You okay? Where's my husband? My husband isn't here. Even though he promised that he'd stay with me the whole time. Even though he promised that he'd grasp my hand the whole time. Kraus was struck dumb by this attitude of hers, which she had never shown in front of him before, but Natsui understood her feelings. Calm down. Hideyoshi-san's with Rudolph-san and Kirie-san, and they're outside right now. Outside? Why? Why did he go outside? After he promised that he'd stay with me the whole time. You mustn't go outside. The witch is outside. You mustn't go, you'll be killed. Ah. Eva, calm yourself. Hideyoshi-san returned to the mansion with Rudolph and Kirie-san. Why do you have to go to the mansion? Why did he go outside even though it's safe here? Why did he go back to the mansion? They went to get enough food to last until tomorrow. Hideyoshi-san was worried about your health, and said that was partly why he wanted to go. When will they come back? When will they come back? Don't go outside, don't go to the rose garden, don't go to the mansion. The witch is there, the golden witch is walking about. If she finds you, you'll be killed. You'll definitely be killed. When will my husband come back? They left here 30 minutes ago. We're waiting for their return. 30 minutes ago? Isn't that strange? Why would it take so much time for them to go to the mansion to get food and come back? And why are you two just standing around here? We have to go get them. We have to hurry to where they are. Eek. Eva probably had quite a nightmare. And because it had continued, even after she woke up, she could no longer hide her panic. Natsui tried calming her down, but all it did was make Eva's emotions explode even more. Maybe they heard that disturbance. Battler and the kids who had supposedly been on the 2nd floor were peeking their faces through the crack of the lobby door. Kraus, Natsui, Eva, and Battler, George, Jessica, Nanjo. Everyone in the guest house had gathered by the entrance and understood the current situation. I agree with Mother. We should go to check on Father and the rest. Oh, they're all going out. Yeah, that's right. It's even possible that their load's too heavy and they're having trouble carrying it. They should welcome some extra hands. This happened right after Rosa-san was attacked. This may have been a secondary disaster connected to that. We should act with caution here and... Don't be a fool. What do you mean caution? You saying we should let my husband die even though he might be begging for help? I'm gonna look, and the cowards can stay here. Looking agitated, Eva raised her gun. Judging by her face, it would be useless for anyone to try and stop her. George, who realised that first, raised his head. I'll go as well. You will too, right, Battler-kun? The more people the better. Sure. Aunt Eva, we're coming, even if you tell us not to. I'm coming too. I can't be the only one to hide in a safe place. Jessica, you must not go outside. Stay here with me. Got it? It was like they were implying that those 3 had already been killed anyway, so going outside would be pointless. Natsui realised that Eva felt like her heart had been gouged out, but she spoke out strongly as Jessica's mother. You're right. That should be fine. Let's have Nissan's family keep an eye on the guest house. This is a problem for my family and Batlakun's, and I wonder if Dr. Nanjo would mind coming too, just in case. Here we go. Let's see what they find. Will they find the corpses? In the hall of the mansion, Battler, Eva, George and Nanjo found the corpses of Rudolph, Kyrie and Hideyoshi. The 4th through 6th twilights. Then the corpses were pierced through the forehead, chest and stomach with those demon stakes. Yes. The demon stakes were buried into them, one in Rudolph's forehead, one in Hideyoshi's chest, and one in Kyrie's stomach. The disorder of the clothing on all 3 suggests that they were fighting or running away. Since the 3 corpses were not found right next to each other, it is hypothesized that after coming into contact with the culprit, they attempted some form of resistance. And they had stakes in the forehead, chest and stomach. Horrible, just like usual. Even though Ronove knew it would be superfluous, he contemplated telling Battler the truth. Normally, the witch would have killed them in a much more horrible way. The corpses had been left in this manner only because Beto had suggested to the witch that she show restraint. The new witch, thinking it would fit well enough as long as she gouged them with stakes, would probably have just stuck a stake into a lump of meat that wasn't even shaped like a human. Rosa's and Maria's corpses were a particularly striking example. If they'd been killed as the Golden Witch had wished, just how gruesome would the corpses have been? Beto had changed that into the still better kind of killing Battler had mentioned earlier. Wanting to have Beto's small bit of thoughtfulness appreciated, he thought of telling Battler about this, but judging by Battler's eyes, that might do more harm than good. To humans, the gap between being alive and being dead is very large. Saying that she'd given them better deaths might have made it possible for a demon to understand her feelings and pardon her, but there was no way a human would be so accepting. Understanding this, Ronove remained silent despite knowing of Beto's modest efforts. Just like usual, let's start by checking whether the corpses are dead. Ronove, please declare it in red. Hey, can't you hear me? Please declare it in red. Repeat it. Rudolph, Kyrie and Hideyoshi are dead. My apologies. Allow me to decline from repeating that. The hell? What are you planning, all of a sudden? By now, proclaiming that the victims were dead in red was almost a given in this battle. Refusing to do that was almost like losing by default. So when Ronove refused as part of his first move, Battler was dumbfounded. My apologies. As of this moment I relinquish my position as Milady's representative. Accordingly, I cannot repeat that in red. The only one qualified to repeat that is Milady. His point is a valid one. Ronove is only a representative for Beto's side. If he steps down from that position, and if he will not accept Beto as an opponent, a new representative must be named. No new representative exists. Please, Battler-sama, please accept Milady as a game partner once more. Sorry, but that's advice I can't listen to. I definitely won't accept that unpleasant, cruel bastard as my opponent. My refusal to accept her is why I can't step down from this game. As to her being unpleasant, I apologise in Milady's stead. Allow me to pledge that Milady will not undertake such unpleasant actions again. I wonder about that. Battler-kun, I also want to apologise as that child's teacher. I'll give that child a good talking to, so please offer your forgiveness just this once. Hey, enough of that. You're making it sound like I'm the bad guy. And no matter how much you guys apologise, it won't reach my ears. If Beto can say that from her own lips, well, I might listen to her. Understood. If that's your only condition for acknowledging your opponent again, let's have that child apologise. Ronove, call for that child. Will that be alright, Battler-kun? Sheesh. Do whatever you want. Still, don't expect me to forgive her. Go get that irritating witch. You have my thanks, Battler-sama. I shall summon her here. Milady, Battler-sama is calling for you. After a few heartbeats, gold butterflies gathered together in mid-air and created Beto's form. It was a much more docile appearance than the ones she'd made before. Did you call, Ronove? I believe you heard. Is there something you have to say from your own lips? It looked as though Beto shrunk slightly under Battler's cold gaze. Several times, Beto made an effort to get the words out of her mouth, but that didn't work so well. And she was just as awkward as someone trying to light a match during a freezing winter with icy hands. Even as she did that, the game board was advancing. In the hall, they had just found the corpses of the new victims and had broken down crying. I'll go back to it, right? Dad, Kyrie-san. Oh. Dear. Wah. Mother, hang in there. Even for me, it's so crushing, so sad. They probably died instantly. I'm sure that even if we had arrived immediately after they fell, it would have been too late. No, that's wrong. They were definitely alive. His chest was stabbed or something like this. My husband must have died in extreme pain. If we had come faster, surely they would have been saved. They would definitely have been saved. It must be tough for you too, Battler-kun, but stay strong. I'm okay. It's okay, Nikki. Let me cry just a little bit longer. I've got it the best. I should be the least sad. So if you let me cry just a little longer, I'll be fine. That isn't true. I can understand how much it must hurt your heart to have lost both parents. I still have Mother. That's much better than what you're going through, Battler-kun. No, that's wrong. It's got to be toughest for you, George Aniki. I understand, Aniki. In this group, you're the saddest, and the one who has it toughest. I understand that, so I can't keep on sobbing like this. Why'd you say it's toughest for me? To me, Dad and Kyrie-san were people I'd eventually split up with when I grew up and became independent. Since their parents, it was fated that they'd die before their kids. It just happened a little earlier, that's all. But it's different for you, Aniki. You didn't just lose your parents, who would have parted ways with you eventually. You also lost Shannon-chan, someone you should have spent the rest of your life with. You can't value human lives differently. Whether it's a baby or an old person, they should all be respected the same. But still, the more life that person has ahead of them, the longer the future you're building together is, the sadder the fact of their death is. Aniki, you're engaged to Shannon-chan, right? You promised that you'd build a life and a home together in the future, right? Compared to how huge that future was, compared to how huge that happiness was, stuff like my pain doesn't even come close. So you should be allowed to cry much more, Nikki. And yet just because you act like a big brother to us cousins, you force yourself to act like you're so calm. Stop it, Battler-kun. George was trying to make a calm smile, but already he couldn't stop a single hot tear from leaving a streak down his face. There's no way I wouldn't. Be sad, right? Together with Shannon, I painted a picture of many futures in my mind. We talked of dreams that couldn't all come true, even if we lived 100 years. Of course, of those dreams, even the very first one, having her move into my family register, could not be granted. So there's no way I wouldn't be sad, right? Compared to that, like I said, I have no right to cry anymore. When even you're struggling to hold it in, I have no right to shed any more tears. We're the same. We both feel the same sadness from losing those close to us. So there's no rule that says you can't shed any more tears than me, Battler-kun. And for me too, there's no rule that says I have to hold back my tears any longer, is there? Aniki. Shannon, the one who shared my dreams for the future, is dead. Father's dead too. It's so sad, so sad. As Battler and George hugged each other tightly, they cried a waterfall of tears over each other's shoulders for the people who had been so precious to them. Do you understand why I said that George Aniki has it toughest? I was listening, so I understand. Your sadness is proportional to the length of time you would have been able to spend with that person afterwards. Of course, you can't calculate it just like that though. We humans aren't like you witches. From the time we receive life to the moment we die, we live within that limited period as strongly as we can manage. I can't forgive anyone who makes light of that. And I definitely can't forgive anyone who sneers at people and toys with them. A person like you, whose very concept of death is all screwed up, probably can't understand that. I'm not just mad because of the length of time they would have lived afterwards. It's sneering at the lives of people living with all they've got. That's what I can't forgive the most. George Aniki lived his life by recklessly doing his best. He must have approached this day with a grim resolve to marry Shannon-chan no matter the challenges. That's completely different from me, since I was happy just to be able to meet my cousins after a long while. But still. Beto, for now, stay silent and listen. Indeed. In a way, I understand your point. You say you need to continue murdering according to the epitaph for your own resurrection. So considering your circumstances, I can just barely bring myself to understand your murders. Because to you, it's a necessary course of action. But that means all unnecessary actions you take beyond that are due to your meaningless and brutal tastes. In other words, if killing the 6 people for the first twilight was a necessary action for you, then all that show of crushing their faces and splitting their stomachs and stuffing them full of sweets was completely unnecessary, and caused by nothing more than your brutal hobby. That's an aspect of you that I definitely cannot forgive. Indeed. When you saw Aunt Rosa getting repeatedly killed in that horrible way, you apparently said something like, if they're going to be brought back to life in the end anyway, it doesn't matter how they're killed. I heard from Virgilia. As to that, well, that idea that you can kill them as many times as you want, as long as you bring them back to life in the end, isn't that a completely unnecessary action, with no purpose other than to toy around with someone's life? If you're gonna kill, do it instantly. Don't toy with them. If you won't kill them, then don't bully them. You're taking advantage of the fact that you can do as well as you will with people's lives, and you've forgotten the sanctity of life. So I can't accept or acknowledge you. I definitely can't accept as my opponent a person who doesn't know the value of a life, or the sadness felt when lives are lost. This is why the Endless Magic is known as a black art. The Endless Witch has no concept of limitations. She has no concept of the limitations and losses caused by breaking and killing. For that reason, Endless Witches sometimes start playing by jumping over the gap between life and death, like it's a game. That's a very, very frightening thing. So as an Endless Witch, and by my own choosing... Here comes. I never reached your level. It was something Virgilia had been trying to tell Beto for a long time, but Beto had been too young to obediently listen to those words. She had been too wild. She had been possessed by that detestable pleasure. I've been told not to break vases, but that's why I wanted to break them. Then I gained the Endless Magic, when I knew that I could fix them back to normal, no matter how badly I broke them. I was surprised at how fun it could be to break a vase. That's what's known as the Forbidden Honey. People are not captivated by what's inside, they are captivated by the sealed lock. It's truly regrettable. I want to ask you, Virgilia, why does this thing called the Endless Magic exist? For what purpose does it exist in this world? It's not limited to the Endless Magic. All magic exists to bring happiness to the human world. After everything that's happened, it may be difficult for you to believe, Battler-kun, but in order to bring blessings to the human world, we witches are supposed to become bridges between humans and non-humans, and that's why we train so hard. How do reviving the dead and torturing them to death over and over again help the human world? When a vase that was an important memento is broken, if by fixing it everyone will regain their smiles, I would repair it with magic as many times as necessary. However, I would not be fixing it in order to break it again. I would be reviving it to give humans happiness. In that case, Beto, you fail as an Endless Witch. Indeed. There's this thing I've been vaguely thinking about. Why do I keep playing this strange game against you? Maybe this game isn't about making me surrender. Maybe it's a test for you to be accepted as an Endless Witch, in the truest sense. I don't know about that. The reason I proposed this game to you was simply as a way to kill time. There were no ulterior motives at work. Just now, I heard the definition of a witch from Virgilia. By that definition, you, Beto, are not even a witch. You're an apprentice who's still in training, and who misunderstands her own power. This was supposed to be a fight between a witch and a human. If you aren't a witch, then you aren't qualified to be my opponent. Understand? You say, I am still only an apprentice? Then when will I be accepted as your opponent once again? When can we resume this game? Who knows? At the very least, it isn't now. When you fully understand what I've said and become a real witch, I'll probably accept you as my opponent in this game once more. I can't understand if you say it so abstractly like that. Clearly tell me what I should do to earn your forgiveness. No, I've said enough. You think about the rest. That's all I want to say. If you can't figure it out, try talking with Virgilia and Ronave. A brat like you should start off by listening to what the adults say. Virgilia, suspend the game for now. Now that Ronave has stepped down as representative, all we can do is wait for Beto to gain the qualifications of a proper opponent. Understood. Until Beto has been acknowledged as having earned those qualifications, the game will proceed without an opponent. Is that alright with you too, Beto? I have no objections. I want time and a place where I can think at a leisurely pace. May I leave my seat for that? Yeah, that's fine. Well then, see you later. Wait, don't make that dejected face. Sorry about that. Letting everything inside my heart show up on my face as part of my personality. I cannot deceive. Then maybe there's still some hope for you. Let me promise you one thing. In this game with you, I might win and I might lose. If you don't come back, it might be my victory by default. At that point, Battler stopped talking for a second. Then he spoke forcefully. However, I definitely won't be the one to step down. I definitely won't give you a victory by default. I'll keep on waiting here for you to sit there again as my worthy opponent. Battler's hammer. Thank you, Battler. I will definitely come back and be accepted by you. After showing a hopeful smile for a very short while, Beto vanished. After seeing her expression as she left, Battler was absolutely convinced that her face could tell no lies. The 7 survivors returned to the guest house once again. They all lived! For now. Oh. By now, it was clear that those who went outside would not return alive. Rudolph's group had gone out with 2 guns and a master key, but those had been lost. It was already clear that those had been stolen by the culprit. Because the shutters were closed on the windows, they couldn't be opened even if the culprit had a master key. The front and back doors that led to the outside were all sealed by chains, and they were further blocked with sofas and tables. Even if the culprit decided to break in through violent means, it wouldn't be easy for them. At this point, the typhoon may actually be fortunate. If it were clear outside, it might have been possible for them to set fire to the guest house. If there wasn't a typhoon in the first place, the boat would have arrived before noon. That's not much of a silver lining. Eva-san, how do you feel? Please try to take it easy. Thank you. I still feel like I have a fever. This is no time to complain about that. For the children's sake as well, this is no time to be bedridden. After crying so much in front of Hideyoshi's corpse, Eva had felt a strong self-awareness of her position as a mother, and her expression conveyed a strong will. In actual fact, her fever still hadn't gone down, and she was aware that, if she didn't keep a strong hold on herself, she felt as though the fever would make her mind hazy again. By this point, the first floor formed a final line of defence set up by Kraus, Natsui and Eva. The children and the guest, Nanjo, had been strongly warned not to go downstairs without taking great care. If the culprit used a ladder or something, it probably wouldn't be impossible for them to attack from the second floor. But it wouldn't be easy for them to break those sturdy shutters from such an insecure position. The second floor was relatively safe compared to the first. Battler and George had also wanted to remain on the first floor, so they could fight if the worst happened, but Eva had put a stop to that. In her mind, George was now the only member of her family. It seemed that she didn't want to expose him to the danger of coming downstairs to the first floor. Kraus and Natsui could understand that feeling. Also, a great deal of time had passed since the siege began. In the second-story cousin room, Battler, George and Jessica sat dazed, and didn't even listen to the TV that had been left on. For a while, Nanjo had been with them, and had tried to lend them words of encouragement, but when he realised that he might actually be having the opposite effect, he hid himself in his own room on the same second floor. George kept looking dazedly at the photographs inserted in his notebook. It was from the time he'd taken a vacation to Okinawa with Shannon. Shannon's happy smile was contained in those photos. George could remember the temperature and the humidity, the warmth and strength of the wind, and even what he had been talking about with her at the time those photos had been taken, as clearly as though it had been yesterday. So to George, they weren't simply photos, but a door to bring back warm memories. In this room, even though the sound of the typhoon and the TV should have entered George's hearing. It was the scenery of Okinawa he had seen with her, and her laughing voice that reached his eyes and his ears. George had strived to be reborn after meeting Shannon. He had sworn to separate himself from the timid person he had once been, easily caught up in the atmosphere, unable to refuse a request, and easily used by those around him. He had resolved himself to become a strong man who could make her life more joyous. Therefore, if he had met Shannon, the man called Jeremiah George would probably have lived a very different life, and the George of that different life surely wouldn't have been as excellent a man as he is now. The person I am now exists for Shannon's sake. Now that Shannon is gone, why do I exist? It's completely meaningless, isn't it? He felt a deep, deep sadness, as though he himself had become empty. That feeling must have been tormenting him this whole time. However, until Battler mentioned it, he hadn't been aware of the feeling himself. He'd finally managed to remember that it should have been alright for him to cry much, much more. So he cried. Just like Battler had, he cried himself dry. By now, his eyes were bright red and swollen, and he couldn't cry anymore. So George did his best to change his way of thinking. He was not meaningless now, and he should be grateful to Shannon for giving him such character. The dead don't come back to life. He would have to get over being separated from his most beloved person. If he were to chase after Shannon and kill himself, she would surely be deeply dejected. It worked the other way around too. If he had died and Shannon had chased after him, thrown away her own life, he wouldn't have been able to forgive himself. So he chose to surpass his sadness and anger, and decided to thank her instead. After meeting Shannon, she made his days rich and full, and taught him the meaning of working hard for other people's sakes. As a result, she had shaped him into the kind of person he had wanted to be. He wanted to thank her for that. He tried to quell his sadness in this way, but each time he did, he remembered Shannon's smile. He understood it logically. He knew that grieving any more than this would only make her grieve in heaven, but that didn't bring a stop to his sadness. Why is it that when people die, it's so sad like this? Battler muttered. It was as though he was speaking on behalf of all humans. His question probably hadn't been directed at anyone, but Jessica answered. It's always sad when you have to say goodbye. But when the person's old, or there's some time, when you know beforehand that it's coming sooner or later, that sadness gets spread out over a long period of time. When misfortune comes suddenly, it's sad, because you don't even get that time. I see. So if they get sick or something and end up bedridden in a hospital, you might be able to ready yourself for it bit by bit. But when it happens suddenly someday, you don't get that luxury. The sadness that's usually spread out over several years closes in on you all at once. That's pretty tough. Sometimes it makes you feel a sadness so deep, it can leave scars for life. Scars for life, huh? Like Grandfather's occult hobby, people say that's what caused it. That Beatrice, his mistress, died a long time ago, and he was so sad that he couldn't pull himself together. Some people whisper that this is why he started sacrificing the rest of his life to occult research in order to revive the dead. If that's true, Grandfather succeeded in that miracle in his last moments. The culprit is the revived Beatrice, and Grandfather was reunited with her at the moment he was killed. Pretty ironic that he revived her and then got killed by her. Even so, Grandfather probably managed to meet her. He gambled half his life, and even though it was only for a short time, he was reunited with the woman he wished to see once again. Then he got totally roasted though. Feels like that result doesn't quite add up to the cost of researching for half his life. That's not true. Even if it was only for an instant, Grandfather must have been happy to be reunited with the woman he loved. And that would be true, even if his crime of going against divine providence was punished by God, and his body was burnt and sent down to hell. Even if that reunion only lasted a very short time, right? George Nissan? I wouldn't care I met with the wrath of God and had my body burned. Even if it was just for a short amount of time, if I could revive Shannon again, I would sacrifice the rest of my life to the same research as Grandfather. I want to talk with Shannon again, even if it's only for 5 minutes. Even 1 minute would be fine. In exchange, I wouldn't mind sacrificing the rest of my life. Aniki. When Battler and Jessica realised that their pointless discussion was causing George pain, they could do nothing more than shut their mouths. George directed his thoughts to Kinzo's life. He sacrificed half his life to research that no one understood. And on the last day of his life, he revived the person he loved most, and probably succeeded in his reunion in his final moments. George didn't know how much time they'd had together. He didn't know if they'd been given an hour, or just 5 minutes. However, that moment must have been enough to reward him for all those months of research. Even though he spent dozens of years to achieve it, that small amount of time was probably more than worth it to him. Until today, I never believed in the occult, or magic, or anything. Somewhere in my heart, I even made fun of Grandfather's research, thinking of it as nothing more than a pastime. However, I won't make fun of it anymore. No, to the contrary, I believe strongly that it's real. If it's the power of belief can create miracles, I'll probably throw away all my studies up until today, spending the rest of my life from today onwards studying magic. Give me the power of magic, and give me a miracle that'll let me see Shannon again. Yeah. Sorry you two. What am I talking about? If you could revive the dead with magic, people would probably be researching it everywhere around the world. But things like that don't exist in reality. No one researches it. That's because they know the dead can't be revived with magic. Sorry for saying something so weird. It's my fault that the atmosphere here has gotten so strange. Sorry for making you tiptoe around me, even though this is tough for us all. Even if I did it to divert myself from my sadness, maybe I did say something strange. If I keep talking about stuff that's so weird, I'm sure it won't do anything good for their sadness. But that doesn't mean I can bear this silence. I'll go downstairs and get another cup of coffee. Mum's very particular about how she likes hers. Does anyone else want a refill? Batlakun and Jessica-chan lightly shook their heads. Without pressing them any further, I took my mug and left the room. The shutters were all closed in the hallway, so the corridor was very dim. I tried visiting Dr. Nanjo's room and asking if he wanted more coffee, but he said he didn't need any either. It seems my mother's orthodox method of making coffee isn't universally appreciated. One time I made some for Shannon, but she told me that while it was delicious, it was a little strong. Shannon. That's no good. Even though I left the room to change my mood. That image of Shannon's face filling my head hasn't faded in the slightest. I keep seeing those fun days with her more and more vividly, and it's saddening that I never even got a chance to see her dead face. According to our parents, she was apparently killed with something like a gun or a spear. I'm sure they were just trying to console me, but they had said her dead face had been very beautiful and peaceful. I wonder if she had the engagement ring I gave her last night on her finger. If she accepted my engagement, she should have it on the ring finger of her left hand. Last night, we were both on the edge of losing it and not calm at all. Shannon accepted my engagement pretty courageously, but she might have regretted that as a rash action when she cooled her head. She might have taken the ring off. I wonder if she has the ring on now. I want to be sure of at least that much. I want to know how she felt at the very end. But even if I do confirm that, it doesn't mean she'll come back. I wonder what will happen to her body. After the autopsy, I'll probably be immediately cremated. Then I'll never be able to see her face, even her dead face, for all eternity. Has the shock of losing Shannon made me go a little crazy? I don't want her body to be burned. If she's burned and turned to ash, never again will it be possible for her to revive. They say cremation is frowned upon in Western tradition, because on the day of resurrection, there will be no body to revive. Because of that, it seems that great criminals in Western history were often cremated after execution as a punishment, and their ashes were sometimes scattered in rivers and such. In other words, to Western people, death is nothing more than a sleep until the resurrection. It's essential that the corpse is left after death. In other words, that's because Western people knew of a miracle that can revive the dead. But because that miracle doesn't exist in Japan, we burn them. Now I understand. I understand why Grandfather idolized the Western occult. That was his only reason from the very beginning. Just to revive the person dear to him, Grandfather spent the rest of his remaining life researching the Western occult. The situation surrounding us now is abnormal. Grandfather did revive his beloved Beatrice, and that Beatrice has carried out a terrible serial murder, with linked closed rooms that force us to conclude that magic was used. The Golden Witch, Beatrice, the incarnation of the miracle of the Western occult, and also the culprit who killed Shannon. She's an entity I should hate, and yet, for some reason I want to cling to her. I wonder if Shannon could be revived with the magic of miracles, which Grandfather bet his life on. According to the legend of the Ashurmaya family, Grandfather met with her long ago and was given a vast quantity of gold. Then if I also met with her, instead of gold, would she give me Shannon's life? As collateral, I don't care what sort of devil's contract she imposed. I wouldn't mind sacrificing all my remaining life. George probably couldn't believe or realise that his voiceless wish was heard by the witch herself, who stood right behind him. Beatrice had been listening to that entire discussion between the children just now in the cousin room. Battler had told her that she didn't know the value of a human's life, and wanting to understand that in her own way, she had stealthily visited, listening in on their discussion. That's your wish, you say? If I could grant that, would I be accepted as a wish? Witch? Beto looked at the palms of both of her hands. She had handed over most of her once surging magical power when the new witch succeeded the name of the Endless Witch. Of course, her current power still made her worthy of being called a witch, but it could not begin to compare to her previous strength. Even without the endless magic, I'm a great witch whose name has been thundered for 1,000 years. Reviving the dead will be no trouble at all. Inside her head, she thought about several magical steps she could take to revive the dead. Even magic that should have been easy in the past would be difficult with her current power. She thought of something, then clicked her tongue, then did so again, over and over. In the end, she finally thought of a single spell. But that was a spell that she couldn't use by herself. It was a spell that witches with weak power used, one that relied on the aid of others. In the past, Beto had looked down upon that type of magic. Therefore, she frantically tried to search for any conceivable alternative, but in the end she couldn't think of one and slumped over in self-derision. Then, careful not to surprise him, she softly called out, softly to George's heart. Ashurmaya George, can you hear my voice? I can hear you. Who are you? Are you really the witch, Beatrice? Or are you an illusion created by my sorrow? If it's the former, please hear my wish, and if it's the latter, just leave me alone. Their conversation in a mental world was a lot like having one in a dream. When you dream, haven't you ever had the experience of casually accepting something that would have been absurd in the real world? The conversation in this world was like that. So even though a witch appeared and started talking to George, he was not surprised. Indeed, I am the Golden Witch Beatrice. Normally, you and I would not be able to talk together in this manner. However, you are strongly conscious of me and wish to have a discussion, so both of our channels are able to match like this. And I don't care if the person who killed Shannon was you or someone else using your name, as long as you exist as a real witch. I'll pay whatever cost you ask for. If you desire my life, take it right now. Please, I want you to bring Shannon back to life. If that's impossible, I'd be satisfied if you'd just let me talk to her for a short while. Please. I ask for nothing in return. I shall grant that wish. Really? Really? You'll revive Shannon? Indeed. However, my current magical power is not sufficient to use the magic of resurrection. Therefore, I must rely on your help. If there's anything I can do, I'll do it. Even if that means taking my heart out right here and now, I'll not hesitate. I told you, I don't need anything like that. I'll chant the magic. Then a gap will open in the door to the land of the dead. But as I am now, I do not have the power to bring Shannon's soul up through that gap. However, you have strong feelings for Shannon, and those feelings will surely become magic that can bring her soul out without fail. What do you say? Will you help me? I will. If Shannon's life will be restored, there's nothing I'm afraid to lose. George's fists shook in silence. Then he slowly came to his senses. He had been absent-mindedly standing near the window in the hall that whole time, his mug still in his hand. And the witch from his dream was still there. What the? It isn't a dream. Be quiet. I'm very fragile now. If any more humans appear, I'll not be able to preserve this form. I shall grant your wish, so stay silent for now. Understand? George covered his mouth with both hands, nodding enthusiastically several times. In an instant, he almost dropped the mug he was holding. George frantically juggled it around and caught it. He was afraid that if it fell to the floor and made a loud sound, the witch's form might disappear like a bubble popping. He softly set the mug on the floor and stared at the witch in front of him again. Her form didn't disappear. It wasn't a dream. Come, let's go to the parlour where Shannon sleeps. With the power of your feelings, we will bring back your soul. You say go, but how? My mother and the rest are downstairs. There's no way they'd let us go outside. And didn't you just say that you wouldn't be able to preserve your form if another human appeared? Come to think of it, that's true. So Klaus and the rest are downstairs. In that case, we definitely cannot go down. Well then, we just need to go to the mansion without going down to the first floor, right? It's simple. Beetle laughed, as though she had thought of a pleasant prank. And with her golden pipe, she lightly tapped the window with its shutter closed. When she did, 3 gold butterflies appeared from the pipe and opened the lock on the window as though melting it. Then the window opened without a sound. The shutter beyond it was exactly the same. The clasp unset itself, also without making a sound, and it quietly opened. The window opened, exposing the wind and rain outside the mansion. Perhaps because of the direction, or something related to the construction of the building, the wind did not blow inside. Because of that, for a while, George felt as though this entrance that opened to the outside was a dream or an illusion, and he couldn't accept it as real. Come, let us go. Come with me. Beetle gently floated upwards. It was a natural action, like that of a diver enjoying an underwater stroll. It made it easy to believe that if you acted like she did, you too might be able to float in the sky, just as though you were swimming through the water. No, George did believe that. So without thinking, just as she had done, he also, gently, as though swimming in the water, lifted his feet. Ah. Huh. Not bad. So you learned how to dance in the sky, faster than I could explain it. George was shocked to find himself floating in midair, like he was swimming. Of course, Beetle was also shocked that George, who shouldn't have been able to use magic, had figured out how to do that just by instinct. To be able to fly in the air, to swim in the air. You mustn't be bound by reason. Accept it as a natural thing. You mustn't fall back to your human doctrines, such as those of Newton and Einstein. Especially when flying high in the sky. Inexperienced witches sometimes plummet to the earth. Accept things for what they appear to be. Accept things for what they appear to be. George repeated those words over and over. He must not deny magic, no matter what. Denying that would be like throwing away what might be his first and last chance to revive Shannon. However, compared to Beetle, who was elegantly drifting like smoke, George's movements clearly resembled someone underwater. Therefore, if he didn't act like he was kicking his feet in water every once in a while, he'd be caught by the force of gravity, bit by bit. I must say you're doing better than when I first danced through the sky. Here we go. Come with me. When Beetle beckoned to George, she gently flew into the stormy sky. It was just like a scene from a fairy tale. The scene unfolding before George's eyes felt entirely like an extension of his dream. Being able to fly is incredible, but so is the wind and the rain. What's this? Are the wind and rain tormenting you? I could teach you magic to block against that, but it may be too early for you, and it may be a misuse of time right now. The magic I need isn't that. George wore a strong-willed gaze, refusing to let the wind and rain get to him. The mansion's coming into sight. Hold out just a little longer. If you fall now, you'll hit the bushes in the rose garden. The undulating rose garden was spread beneath the witch and George's gaze. This illusion, like seen, no longer surprised George. Only the gradually approaching mansion was reflected in his eyes. Shannon, wait for me. I will definitely revive you. Oh, here she comes. At that time, the cruel new witch could be seen staring at the guest house from a different location. Now all that's left is the 7th and 8th twilights. Just 2 more, and my obligation to that old hag predecessor is finished. I'll kill Kraus and Natsui. Let them die together like the good couple they are. Where's the target near? In the lobby on the first floor of the guest house, 2 targets under Shurumaya Eva identified, measuring anti-magic power levels. Data link to 410. 410 data received. Anti-magic power levels are extremely low. If Eva just goes outside, they're tuna and abalone on a chopping board. What do you think, great Lady Beatrice? When you give the order, we shall snipe right away. Please, your orders. You guys really are convenient furniture. Not at all like that old second-hand furniture that's only useful for gouging corpses, right? Jester sisters, please show me your skill once more. Prepare to fire. And carry out the corpses again. Got it? Because I'll play with them a lot. No complaints from you, right, Ronave? Correct. As you command. At that moment, the witch noticed something. It was as though some presence had disappeared. Was it her imagination? Was that someone's presence just now? Did anyone feel it? My apologies, I haven't noticed anything, so please forgive me. We were in the middle of observing the guest house, so our peripheral surveillance was set to off. What about you, Lucifer-chan? Did you feel any presence? For just an instant, Lucifer glanced at Ronave, asking whether she should answer honestly or not. Ronave gave a small nod in response. No. My apologies, Beatrice Hammer. We noticed nothing. Forgive us the stupidity of our second-hand furniture. I see. If a great demon like you says that, then it must have been my imagination. The witch persistently stared in the direction the presence had disappeared to. That was where the rose garden lay, and beyond that, she could see the mansion's dark silhouette created by lightning. It took quite some time before she pushed her unsatisfied feelings aside, and once again faced the guest house. Ooh! Okay, so George is going towards Shannon in the hopes of reviving her, and Eva Beatrice is going to try and kill off the last 2 people. So that's where we're ending things off today then. This has been Greeny XI. I hope you've enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again in a bit, where it looks like we're heading back to the guest house. See you in a bit, folks.